Longtime fans of when Sammy Brady returns to Salem, she never does so quietly. And Thursday's episode is no exception. Sammy, played by Alison Sweeney, is back, and she's more explosive than ever. This time, her fury is aimed at none other than her own sister, Belle Black, Martha Madison, and the claws are coming out in a confrontation that will leave fans gasping and talking for weeks. Trouble is brewing. Sammy returns to Salem after months away from Salem. Sammy Brady has every reason to return. Her world has been unraveling in her absence. Her ex-husband, Lucas Horton, is behind bars for kidnapping her, a betrayal she's still trying to process. Her son, Johnny D. Mara, is confused and questioning his origins, sending Sammy into protective mother mode. But the most pressing reason for her return? Her other ex-husband, EJ D. Mara, Dan Feuerriegel, was shot in his own living room and is now lying in a coma in the hospital. Sammy races to the hospital with fear and urgency, determined to see EJ and uncover who is behind the attack. But when she arrives, she gets far more than she bargained for. A shocking discovery: Belle at EJ's bedside. As Sammy steps into EJ's hospital room, she finds her sister Belle sitting quietly by his bedside. What she sees next sends shockwaves through her. Belle, with tear-filled eyes, leans forward and softly confesses her love for EJ, brushing his hand and whispering how she's not ready to lose him. The tender scene is more than Sammy can take. She clears her throat dramatically and smirks. Well, isn't this just the sweetest little love story? Too bad it's based on betrayal. Belle jumps at the sound of Sammy's voice, her cheeks flushing with guilt and frustration. But Sammy's just getting started. The verbal attack, Sammy unleashes. You never could keep your hands off my leftovers, could you? Sammy sneers, stepping further into the room. First, you parade around like Miss Perfect, and now you're falling in love with my husband while he's unconscious? Classy, Belle. Real classy. Belle stands up, clearly shaken but trying to maintain her composure. He's not your husband anymore, Sammy. And you haven't been around. EJ needed someone, and I was here. Sammy's voice sharpens. You were here, all right, just like a snake slithering into someone else's bed while they're vulnerable. How many times do I have to tell you to stay away from my men? Belle, trying to defuse the situation, replies, this isn't about you. EJ and I. But Sammy cuts her off with a burst of rage. Don't you dare try to explain this to me like I'm some child. You've always been jealous of me, Belle. Always trying to live in my shadow, always pretending to be better than me. But here you are, drooling over a man in a hospital bed like some desperate housewife. Belle's face turns red. You're unbelievable. You haven't changed one bit. Still selfish, still cruel, and still convinced the world revolves around you. That's when Sammy snaps. The physical explosion, slap, scream, chaos without warning. Sammy's hand flies through the air and lands with a sharp slap across Belle's cheek. The room falls into stunned silence as Belle stumbles back, her hand immediately touching her reddened skin. But instead of backing down, Belle's eyes flare with rage. Don't you ever lay a hand on me again, Belle hisses. And then, bam. Belle lunges forward and pushes Sammy backward into a tray of medical instruments, sending a loud crash echoing down the hospital corridor. Sammy regains her balance, eyes wild, and throws herself at Belle. The two women grapple, pulling hair, shoving, screaming insults as nurses rush into the room. You're a home-wrecking brat. Sammy yells. You're a bitter, washed-up drama queen. Belle fires back. Security is quickly summoned as the sisters are finally separated, with hospital staff intervening and EJ's heart monitor beeping wildly in the background. It's chaos, raw emotion, and years of unresolved tension exploding all at once. Aftermath and fallout. What happens next? Once the fight is broken up, both women are escorted out of the room, still shouting at each other across the hallway. Marlena, their mother, is soon on the scene, horrified by what has unfolded. Meanwhile, word of the altercation spreads fast. Johnny, Sammy's son, is furious with both his mother and aunt, worried that their actions may have worsened EJ's condition. Nicole learns about the brawl and begins questioning Belle's intentions, while Chad tries to calm the situation, fearing that the DiMera name will once again be dragged through the mud. The question now becomes, how far is Sammy willing to go to make Belle pay for what she sees as betrayal? And will Belle stand her ground or walk away from EJ for good? As the dust settles, one thing is certain: Salem hasn't seen a storm like Sammy Brady in quite some time, and Belle Black has just been caught in the eye of it. Stay tuned to Days of Our Lives, as the sisterly feud escalates, secrets come to light, and old wounds rip open in ways no one in Salem will forget. Yesterday's episode, which took place on Wednesday, April 9th, brought about a whirlwind of emotion in Salem. It all began when Belle quietly slipped into EJ DiMera's hospital room, hoping to find a moment of peace. EJ, the powerful and often intimidating DiMera heir, had recently fallen into a coma under suspicious circumstances. Belle, although deeply involved in her own family's issues, felt compelled to see EJ and possibly offer some small measure of comfort. Yet, at first glance, it seemed odd that Belle of all people would visit him. She and EJ had been locked in battle not too long ago. Accusations had flown about like shards of shattered glass. Belle had worn a listening device to spy on EJ, attempting to gather evidence of his misdeeds. Their history was full of tension and mistrust, so it was surprising to find her gently cradling his hand at his bedside and pressing soft kisses to his fingers. Suddenly, everything changed in a heartbeat. EJ stirred, opened his eyes, and broke through his comatose state. Belle thought at first she was only dreaming, or perhaps letting her imagination get carried away. But the corners of EJ's mouth curled into a faint smirk, and he confronted her with words dripping with bitterness, "Like you care." His tone was flat, but the statement held all the weight of his anger and distrust. Belle was stunned, she hardly knew what to say. EJ refused any immediate medical attention, instructing Belle not to summon the doctor, perhaps fearful that his fragile state might become a spectacle. Instead, he questioned her sincerity. Could she really care about him after all the lies, after all the plots, after all the times she had nearly torn his world apart? Belle tried to protest. She insisted that she cared about his well-being, that she did not wish him any suffering. Even though she had once tried to frame him for wrongdoing by using a listening device, she still felt that no one should go through such a frightening experience as being shot or falling into a coma. EJ, naturally suspicious, demanded an answer that would satisfy him. Was she actually capable of compassion and genuine love, or was it simply guilt driving her to his bedside? In a rare moment of vulnerability, Belle found herself unable to maintain her carefully crafted composure. Tears slid down her cheeks, and EJ was left to wonder whether this was real remorse. Was there a chance that she was telling the truth about her feelings? EJ's eyes, once locked in permanent suspicion, gradually softened as though he was beginning to believe in the possibility that Belle's devotion might be more than a fleeting gesture. Just then, Kayla Brady, Salem's devoted doctor and family friend, walked into the room. To her surprise, EJ still appeared very much unconscious, until she realized something was amiss. Kayla could have sworn she had seen EJ stir, yet his eyes were once again closed. Belle, caught off guard, tried to maintain her composure and allowed Kayla to tend to EJ. Kayla encouraged Belle to continue talking to him because, in her professional experience, having someone speak to a patient in a coma can sometimes make a difference. The human voice, after all, can be a powerful trigger for bringing people back from the brink. Kayla's hopeful comment signaled that perhaps, just perhaps, EJ would pull through sooner rather than later. Meanwhile, Kayla asked Belle about her father, John Black. She wondered whether Steve "Patch" Johnson had been successful in bringing John back home. Belle, wearing her heart on her sleeve, spoke quietly about her own concerns for her father's safety. Although she assured Kayla that she believed in Steve's abilities, it was clear that she was worried. She hoped that, just as she stood vigil at EJ's bedside, someone, somewhere, was standing vigil over her father. As Kayla excused herself to meet Sean Brady, Belle's estranged husband or at least longtime partner, depending on the continuity, and J.J. Devereaux in the hallway, Belle was left alone with EJ again. The corridor outside was buzzing with urgent whispers. Sean and JJ had discovered that the crucial bullet needed for the ballistics report had gone missing. The bullet was the key piece of evidence that could reveal exactly who pulled the trigger that landed EJ in the hospital in the first place. There was talk of Kristen DiMera, a relative of EJ's, possibly being involved. Yet no one could say for sure until they retrieved the bullet and ran it through the ballistic tests. Kayla left with Sean and JJ to investigate, leaving Belle alone in that quiet hospital room once more. In those moments, Belle succumbed to the weight of her emotions. She leaned forward, pressed her forehead against EJ's hand, and made a hushed, heartfelt admission, "God help me, yes, I love you, Mom." The words tumbled out, almost as if Belle herself did not realize she had said them. Her mind was in a swirl. Was she truly thinking of her own mother, or was this confession meant for EJ? Perhaps she was simply referencing how complicated her feelings had become and seeking maternal guidance in spirit. But fate had other plans. At that exact moment, the door swung open, and none other than Sammy Brady, Belle's half-sister, walked in. Sammy, a notoriously fierce personality with a track record of explosive confrontations, had heard Belle's tender confession. True to Sammy's larger-than-life style, she wasted no time seizing upon this reveal. She marched into the room like a soldier prepared for battle, eyes ablaze. Once Sammy set her mind on a conflict, there was no turning back. Before Belle could stammer out any sort of explanation, Sammy launched her attack. "You can never keep your hands off my leftovers, can you?" Sammy's voice dripped with sarcasm. Her scornful gaze darted between Belle and EJ, as if sizing up two old rivals in a ring. "First you prance around town acting like the little princess who can do no wrong. Now I find you here, cozying up to my husband, pardon me, my ex-husband, when he's in a hospital bed? Classy, Belle. Very classy." Belle rose to her feet, her nerves vibrating with tension. She tried to keep calm, yet the tremble in her voice gave her away. "He's not your husband anymore, Sammy," she said quietly, her voice steady but undeniably sorrowful. "You left him, and I found him alone and hurting. He needed someone, and I was here for him. That's it. There's nothing more to say." But Sammy, never one to step back, took several bold steps closer to Belle. Her expression was fierce and unrelenting. "Oh, he needed someone, all right," she hissed. "And you just happened to be the first woman to race into his arms? Do you expect me to believe you're doing this out of the kindness of your heart? You always wanted the attention, Belle. You were always jealous of me, my looks, my life, my men. Don't act so innocent now." There it was, the old rivalry laid bare. Belle, for much of her life, had heard that refrain from Sammy. Growing up, Sammy believed that Belle was the good girl of the family, the favored child who could do no wrong in their parents' eyes. Their relationship had been rocky at the best of times and outright hostile at the worst. Now, at EJ's bedside, all their old resentments came roaring back to life, filling the air with bitterness and heartbreak. Belle tried to remain composed, remembering Kayla's words about providing comfort to EJ. She turned her attention back to him, hoping he would awaken again, perhaps enough to mediate, if he cared to. Then she found her voice. "This is none of your business, Sammy." "EJ and I," but Sammy cut her off with a derisive laugh. "None of my business? He's the father of my children, Belle. He's more than just a random fling. And you're telling me to butt out? I'm not leaving him in the clutches of a backstabber. You think you're better than me, but you're just as conniving when it suits you." The words backstabber and conniving struck Belle to her core. She realized that explaining herself to Sammy was like shouting into a whirlwind, futile and exhausting. The tension in the small hospital room became almost tangible. Even the persistent beeping of the medical equipment and the sterile smell of antiseptic were overshadowed by this heated standoff. Although Belle was on the brink of tears, she refused to let Sammy see her crumble. Instead, she set her jaw and met her sister's glare. There was something new in Belle's eyes, an unflinching resolve. In a steady voice, she replied, "You can hurl whatever insults you want. I'm not leaving. EJ needs someone right now. You haven't been around to sit with him all these days, have you? Did you even know he was awake for a brief moment just now? Because I did." That remark hit Sammy like a slap. She paused, momentarily rattled by the possibility that EJ had woken up and might have confided something to Belle. Was there something Sammy needed to know, something Belle might be holding back? For a flicker of a second, uncertainty clouded Sammy's furious eyes. Belle pressed her advantage. "Maybe if you listened, you'd find out what happened here. Maybe if you tried to understand EJ's condition, you'd see that he needs real support. Instead of spewing accusations and jealousy, why don't you show him genuine love?" Sammy's face tightened. The silence between them was like a wire stretched to the breaking point. For a moment, it seemed like the sisters might come to blows. Then, with a sudden flick of her hair, Sammy turned away. She stood at the foot of EJ's bed, gazing at the man they were both fighting for, once her husband, a partner in complicated love and heartbreak. Belle, for her part, laid a gentle hand on EJ's arm, as if protecting him from Sammy's rage. "Think whatever you want, Belle," Sammy said softly, a dangerous edge lingering in her voice. "But don't pretend you can rewrite history. EJ and I have been through more than you could imagine. If he chooses to let you stay, I won't stop him. But don't ever forget who his true family is." With that, she gave Belle one final, searing glare and strode out of the room, letting the door slam behind her. In the hallway, Sammy nearly collided with Kayla, who was returning from speaking with Sean and JJ. Kayla took one look at Sammy's agitated expression and inquired politely, "Is everything all right?" Sammy just shook her head, refusing to speak, and stormed off toward the elevator, leaving Kayla perplexed but reluctant to press the issue. Back in EJ's room, Belle breathed a long sigh of relief. She tried to calm the frantic beating of her heart, aware that this was not the end of the confrontation. Far from it. She could almost see the future battles taking shape. Salem, after all, is a place where grudges take on a life of their own, and family loyalties are constantly tested. Belle pulled up a chair beside EJ's bed, replaying the last few minutes in her mind. She had heard EJ stir earlier, felt the warmth of his hand curling around hers, and knew he had asked one critical question: "Do you really care for me?" She had not answered him fully then, but now her heart brimmed with both fear and longing. Yes, she felt something for him, a flicker of possibility, a spark of feeling that scared her as much as it tempted her. She could not say exactly when the line had blurred between her sense of responsibility and genuine affection. But there it was, her words had spilled out, "Yes, damn it, I love you," in a moment of raw confession. Of course, the presence of Sammy brought all of Belle's guilt and uncertainty swirling back. Had Belle betrayed her sister? Or was this the natural progression of something that had been brewing for months, a simmering connection between Belle and EJ that neither wanted to admit? The question loomed like a storm cloud overhead, ready to drench them all in conflict. In the days to come, there would be new developments: the missing bullet, the ballistics test, Kristen's possible involvement, and the hunt for the real shooter. There were also unresolved threads involving Steve and John, Kayla's concern for her loved ones, and Sean's attempt to keep the peace in a family that seemed to thrive on chaos. Yet at the heart of the drama lay two sisters, Belle and Sammy, who had spent most of their lives vying for love, attention, and validation. EJ, caught in the middle, was both a symbol of power and the object of desire, fueling the rivalry that might just tear the Brady family apart once again. For now, however, Belle sat alone in the hospital room with EJ. She gently smoothed the blanket over his arms and took a moment to breathe. With each cautious inhale, she tried to compose herself, remembering Kayla's advice that speaking aloud to a comatose patient could help them recover. She leaned closer and began talking to EJ once more, sharing every thought and regret that weighed on her mind. Whether or not EJ truly heard her, Belle clung to the hope that somewhere deep within his subconscious, he would recognize her voice, and that maybe he would believe her when she said she cared. Quietly, she whispered, come back to me, EJ. We still have so much to say. Through the hush of the hospital machinery, she waited. In that moment, Belle realized that she was no longer simply performing a duty or acting out of pity. The feelings coursing through her had grown real, no matter how complicated or forbidden they might seem. And as she sat there, with Sammy's heated words still echoing in the hallway, Belle braced herself. Their next encounter was bound to be even more explosive. Love, jealousy, and secrets have a way of surfacing in Salem, and once they do, there's little chance of calm before the next storm.